Well, if I know Jerry and I know Bill, that introduction, I'm sure, raised some eyebrows. It raised some eyebrows because some of you probably sitting there and wondering, wait a minute, what's this about Mother Teresa? And what's this about becoming a terrorist on behalf of the Philadelphia Inquirer? So what I thought I would do is, before I introduce our panel, I'll tell you, take just a few minutes to tell you those two stories, because Jerry has absolutely insisted. So it goes something, I'm in the wrong place. Okay, I've been in the wrong place a lot of times in my life, but never here. So the story about Mother Teresa goes something like this. I'm probably the only person of the Jewish tradition who has ever, an Orthodox Jew on top of it, broken bread with Mother Teresa. Actually, it was chicken soup, and represented as a spokesperson for not one but two popes. And that's kind of an oxymoron. You know, how can you be an Orthodox Jew and become a spokesperson for the Pope? So I'll tell you that little story first. It goes back to a dumb mistake. We all make them. A dumb mistake I made in my life. I left the Philadelphia Inquirer. Bad mistake. The problem was, wonderful paper, but Annenberg paid us in bylines on page 1 instead of, you know, something you could buy bread with. So I left, and I joined one of Philadelphia's largest advertising public relations firms. Some of you may remember it, Gray and Rogers at 1234 Market Street. And one day the boss, Dave Farrell, walked in and he said, guess what? We've got a new client, the Vatican. And we're going to bring the 41st International Eucharistic Congress to Philadelphia. And we want you to do worldwide media relations for the Pope and this event. And the goal is to bring 1 million Catholics to Philadelphia at this time. And I said, Dave, you're missing a beat. Gray and Rogers was a wonderful agency, peopled by lovely Italian Roman Catholics and Irish Roman Catholics, and I was the only Jewish guy in the place. And I said, Dave, I'm Jewish. I've never even been to a mass, let alone knowing anything about catechism. He said, it's all right. You'll learn. You'll learn. So I wound up, indeed, as spokesperson for the Vatican and the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, doing an event that drew President Ford, Mother Teresa, cardinals from all over the world. It was a pretty big event, if you can, during the bicentennial year. And in my capacity doing that, I had the opportunity to sit down in a private meeting with Mother Teresa. It was a wonderful meeting. There was only one problem with the meeting. They served us hot chicken soup without matzo balls. And for me, the Orthodox Jew, that was a bit of a problem. But other than that, it was a great meeting. And one of the things that Mother Teresa told me, and I will never forget, and it's been with me all these years, and that is, so many people in this world are sad and depressed and lonely because they have no purpose, they have no passion. And that got me to thinking. I was working in public relations, and other than the Eucharistic Congress, I hated it. absolutely hated it. And I was doing PR for one reason. Some of you may understand that reason. Money. And that was not a good purpose, nor a good passion. And she left me with that message, and would you believe, she asked me, this is Mother Teresa, the saint of the gutters, as they called her. She asked me, she prayed, and then she turned around and she asked me, is there anything I can pray for you about? And I said, yes, Mother Teresa. I would like to be back in journalism. I'd like to be back in the fourth estate. And she said she would pray. And would you believe, 11 months later, all the doors were closed at the only paper I could then go to. It was called the Philadelphia Bulletin. The doors were closed. Why? Some of you in broadcasting will understand why. If you leave communications, if you leave broadcasting or you leave journalism, you've lost your credibility. You have lost your credibility. And you want to walk back into KYW or CBS or wherever, you've lost your credibility because you were in this thing called, and you'll hear some of our panelists talking about this, public relations. So as I say, 11 months later, call it a miracle if you like, I was back in journalism at the Philadelphia Bulletin. So that's story number one. So story number two is this. I was working at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and if you remember, if you're old enough to remember this, there was a incendiary device, a bomb, that was dropped on the U.S. Capitol back in 1971. Most of you are too young to remember that. But it happened, and hundreds of people fled from that building. No one was injured. It was set by the weathermen to protest the war in Vietnam. When that came out on the wire services, the editors at the Inquirer said, Eisen, go out to the federal building in Philadelphia at 9th and Market. It not only housed the U.S. Post Office, it housed judges' chambers, courtrooms, and all of that. Go out there and see how secure the federal building is. So I went out there, and I brought with me this briefcase, a briefcase that looked just like this briefcase. And I got past the security. I showed my Inquirer press pass. I went to every single restroom, men's restroom in the building. I was able to go up to 6 floors. The 7th was locked. So I went up to all 6 floors, left this bag in there. Not one single security person came in to discover what was in the bag. I'm going to show you what was in the bag. This, what was in the bag, a ticking clock disguised as a incendiary device. No one discovered it, but the next day, the Philadelphia Inquirer ran my story, which actually started some changes at the federal securities. It says, federal courthouse flunks reporter's security test. And from that point on, whether you're a reporter or just any of you sitting in the room, you'd have to show credentials before you go into a federal building. So there are some good things the news media is able to accomplish. So that's my 2 stories. I could go on for the rest of the afternoon, Jerry, but I won't. It's time to introduce our panel. So I'm going to introduce our panel, and
Individual speakers.
they're individual speakers? Oh, I thought we're having a panel. Not a panel. Okay. But I prepared questions for a panel. So can I still ask those questions? They have prepared speeches. Oh. Okay. Well, my issues were sexual misconduct, lying to reporters, news trends in TV, optics in television, crisis management, recreating Kiter, a one-woman play, etc. So hopefully our speakers today may or may not bring up some of these topics, but let me introduce them. We've got Amy Buckman, so I'll introduce Amy. Amy was a producer and on-air talent for Channel 6 for 25 years. Now, in her newest role, she serves as Director of School and Community Relations for the Lower Merion School District. In other words, PR. In an earlier career change, Amy worked as, listen to this, Manager of Public Relations and Special Events at the Philadelphia Media Network. In case you didn't know, that's the home of the Philadelphia Inquirer, Daily News, and Philly.com. Let's give it up for Amy Buckman.
Thank you. We were supposed to prepare a speech? Uh-oh. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. I've been to several Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame dinners before, and it's really my pleasure to be here with you on this dreary day. Much better that we're in here than out on the golf course. You didn't want to be there anyway. So I was told to talk a little bit, I think, about my career path, which did start here in Philadelphia back when I was in high school. When I was myself at Lower Merion High School, when you were a senior, they had a program called Work Experience, where you could do an internship as part of your senior year curriculum the second half of your senior year. And I was lucky enough to get an internship at what was then 1210 AM WCAU radio. And I worked on a radio talk show with a gentleman named Wally Kennedy. He was the morning talk show host, and I worked as an assistant to the producer while I was a senior in high school. I then went off to Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism, where I spent 4 wonderful years. And after graduation, got my first job in broadcasting in Davenport, Iowa, where this Jewish girl from the Philadelphia suburbs was doing the hog report on the noon news and saying, barrows and gilts are selling at Omaha markets at $4.29 a pound. And I had to look up what barrows and gilts were. One of them is a castrated pig. It's a pig they've done something else with. You don't really want to know. I also made the mistake on the air in Davenport. I was the morning show anchor and read a story about the coronation of the Hog Queen at the Iowa State Fair. And I think a little bit of big city cynicism might have crept into my voice when I announced who the winner was. Oh my gosh, did I get phone calls. Fortunately, there were no emails in those days, so I didn't get those. But it was explained to me that being crowned the Hog Queen at the Iowa State Fair is an honor that you do not make fun of. So, word to the wise. After 3 years in the Quad Cities, so it's Davenport and Bettendorf, Iowa, Moline and Rock Island, Illinois, at what started as WOC, which stood for Wonders of Chiropractic, because the television station was owned by the Palmer College of Chiropractic. Apparently we could get free adjustments at the college next door, but I was young and my back was okay, and I never took advantage of that. After 3 years, I was anxious to get back to Philadelphia. And this was when you looked for jobs in Broadcasting Magazine. And there was a job for a producer at 6ABC on their morning talk show, AM Philadelphia. Well, it turns out that Wally Kennedy, for whom I had interned at the old WCAU AM, was now the host of AM Philadelphia on WPVI TV. And I sent him my resume, and we had kept in touch over the years, and he said, oh, she was pretty good when she was my high school intern. Why don't you bring her in for an interview? And Charlie Bradley, who some of you probably know, was the programming director at WPVI back then, and I was hired to become a producer on AM Philadelphia. So I worked with Wally Kennedy and Liz Starr, and then one of the reasons they brought me in was Liz was expecting her son, and they needed someone that could do all the running around for her stories while she was getting more and more pregnant and less doing the running around. And so I covered for her and then also produced stories for Wally while Liz was out on maternity leave. And after a couple of years of working behind the scenes, I don't know if any of you remember the Craig Rabinowitz murder case. He killed his wife in the bathtub of their home. And that case was going to trial in Norristown. By then, Liz had left the television station. Karen Rogers was Wally's new co-host. And I think Karen was out in California doing interviews, and Wally had to stay in the studio. And it was just the opening day of the trial, so Marilyn Pfister, who's also a member of Broadcast Pioneers, was our executive producer. And she said, Amy, why don't you just go out to the courthouse and, it's opening arguments, nothing's really gonna happen, but just so we have a presence out there. Well, lo and behold, the first day of the trial, he pleaded guilty. And so it was like 9:30 in the morning, AM Philadelphia, which had become AM Live by then, went on the air at 10 a.m. The Action News team had a live truck set up, but didn't have a reporter there yet because it was the first day of the trial, nothing was going to happen. And so it was one of those, Broadway understudies gets her chance kind of moments. And I said, well, I was in the courtroom. I know what happened. I used to be a broadcaster, even though I'm just working as a producer now. And they put me on camera, and I reported live on Channel 6 for the first time from the Craig Rabinowitz trial. And after that, began to move back into an on-camera role, first for AM Live, and then later when Action News started a weekend newscast, anchored by Scott Palmer. I moved into the Sunday reporting role and then eventually moved into Action News full-time. And I was there for 25 years. I spent several years as the morning show reporter, and then eventually I created a franchise called Saving with 6 ABC, which was both on air and online, and basically meant I got to go shopping and get paid for it, which was awesome. I loved it, and I shopped all the time. It was great. But after literally spending half my life at Channel 6, there were a lot of changes, as we all know, going on in the world of broadcast. And the live, all the time, 24/7 news cycle, I began to feel that we really weren't delving into storytelling as much as I wanted to. And the reason I wanted to become a broadcast journalist was I love telling people's stories. I love meeting people, learning about them, finding out what's unique about them and their circumstances, and then sharing that to other folks here in the Philadelphia market. And we were doing a lot of standing in the snow with a yardstick and saying there's 6 inches of snow. Now there's 7 inches of snow. And I was kind of wondering, don't these people have windows? And so I wasn't really fulfilled. And I firmly feel that if you're going to spend a lot of your life and a lot of hours of every day at a job, you have to remain passionate about what you're doing. And so I began to think, before I even signed my last contract with the station, that maybe there was something else I should be doing. And so I turned 50, I'd spent literally half my life at Channel 6, and I said, if I'm gonna make a change, now is the time to do it. And so I fortunately have a supportive husband, and I said, guess what? I think I'm not gonna accept another contract at Channel 6, and I'm gonna figure out my next chapter. And so I did what now a lot of people refer to as pivoting, kind of walked out the door, didn't know what I was going to do, other than saying, I'm a communicator, and I want to spend my time communicating about something I can be very passionate about. And I didn't know if it was going to be a nonprofit or something in the arts or philanthropic. And found out that there was a job opening at the Inquirer Daily News in Philly.com for a spokesperson, and also to help them develop events as a third revenue stream to support circulation and advertising, which, as we all know in the newspaper business, are declining revenue streams. And I said, that's it. that's my next job. And I went in and I interviewed, and fortunately, they thought it was my next job too. So that worked out. And I was there for 3 wonderful years, getting to work for and with Jerry Lenfest and the wonderful management team he's brought into our papers. I was there during the transition when he donated the papers to the nonprofit that he has created, and watched them transition their traditional print newsroom now into a digital-first operation. And it was a huge transition on the part of a print newsroom. You know, in broadcasting, we're used to getting our Nielsen ratings. We would know on the talk show, even when I worked there all those years ago, we knew from our Nielsen ratings what topics worked and what hadn't, and we would program accordingly. That was never how they did things at the newspaper. The editors would meet in the morning, they would decide this is important, this is what's going on the front page tomorrow, and that's what the reporters would write about. Well, now with the website, they are beginning to look basically like we have always looked at ratings, at engagement, how long people are reading stories, which stories they're reading, and using that to inform their decisions about what to cover. I don't think that will ever mean at the newspapers you're going to see, you know, the equivalent of cat videos on the front page of the Inquirer, but it does help inform where to allocate resources in an era when resources are tighter in the world of journalism. So I spent a wonderful 3 years there, helped initiate this events department that is now up to 7 people. And that's when I saw that one of my friends from my broadcast years, who had been the director of communications for Lower Merion School District, Doug Young, was leaving. And I was thinking after 3 years of riding SEPTA to Center City that, boy, a job 10 minutes from my house by car wouldn't be a bad thing. Plus, it was my alma mater, my kids' alma mater. We all went through Lower Merion. And so, because a lot of the initiatives that I had undertaken at PMN were in good hands, it felt like a good time to transition. And so I've been at the school district now for 2 months. In that time, let's see, my first week we had a student walkout, and then the governor came to one of our elementary schools. The second week we had 3 snow days and had to cancel part of spring break. And now the district has issued letters of intent to take over numerous suburban properties to build a new middle school. One of them is Stoneleigh, the new natural garden from the Haas Foundation, our Haas family's donation to natural lands. Eminent domain has become part of my vocabulary, and this week I've answered 700 emails. So that's what I'm doing now. But I think the bottom line, and what I've seen over my career, are really a couple of points. First of all, the broadcast community within Philadelphia is really very generous and very interconnected. If Wally Kennedy hadn't remembered me as his student intern and said, yeah, she'd make a decent producer at Channel 6, I don't know what my career path would have been. So I really owe a lot to him. I owe a lot to people like Rebecca Campbell, who allowed me to make that return to being on air after I had been behind the scenes for a couple of years. And also that the basis of what we do as broadcasters is really communicating. And when you have good communication skills, you can apply them in all sorts of different areas. And I think that's why broadcasters really have a lot of opportunities open to them as their careers go on. That's it. I didn't talk about a one-woman show.
Next, I'd like to introduce David Yagdaroff. Did I mispronounce that? Pretty good? Okay. No, I was told it's David next. Mr. Morgan came over and said, be sure to have Mr. Yagdaroff next. He has to leave for CBS. So, sorry. So, Mr. Morgan is the boss. Okay, so David is Vice President and Market Manager for CBS Radio. He oversees all CBS Radio properties in Philadelphia. Real estate reported to be among the 7 strongest brands of any radio market in the country. Those brands include KYW News Radio, Talk Radio WPHT, WIP. David has been with the company more than 20 years. David, come up and tell us your story.
So I didn't mean to create any drama when I told T I had to leave at 2:30, but I guess having been to many of these luncheons, he knows that they can go past 2:30, so he was doing me a favor. Is that better? There you go. Is that good? You got the hard part right. My last name is Yadgaroff, and the easy part is the company I work for. It's no longer CBS Radio, because as of the fourth quarter of last year, CBS Radio no longer existed and became part of Entercom Communications. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about our new parent company, Entercom, and I want to share some things in common with Amy. I also realized through the field experience program, as it was called when I was at Lower Merion, that this business that I was infatuated with could actually be a business and I could have a job. And I interned in a newsroom at Comcast Channel 7 in Lower Merion, which was a one-man newsroom. And that's where I learned a little bit about the business and went to Penn State, and then eventually have been with this company since 1992. So I joined the company at KYW News Radio when it was Westinghouse, Group W Broadcasting. And over the next couple decades, it was Westinghouse and CBS and Viacom and CBS. And about a year and a half ago, Les Moonves decided he wanted to get out of the radio business because it wasn't part of his premium video content strategy for CBS. And we were, at the time, we were disappointed because we had been a big part of the family. And then we thought to ourselves, well, if he's going to sell the business, what kind of company do we want to work for? And those of us in the rank and file realized that it would be a company with a great reputation and a company that invested in its people and its products. And Entercom was one of those companies. We said, boy, that would be a dream if they would buy us. I don't know what you know about Entercom, but they're based in Bala Cynwyd, founded in 1968 by a guy named Joe Field. And they had grown to be a mid-market radio company with about 125 radio stations. And when they merged with CBS, the family together became about 250 radio stations in 48 of the top 50 markets, reaching 90% of the top 50 markets. So it was a perfect marriage because there was good culture on both sides. And if you look at the radio landscape, the other big player is iHeart. And iHeart's in the, I'd say primarily the syndicated business. They have a lot of syndicated talent, not a lot of local engagement. And the whole philosophy about Entercom, and it was CBS's philosophy too, which is why I say it was a perfect marriage, was the power of a local connection on a national scale. So the fact that we reach 90% of the top 50 markets, but also are heavily engaged in our local communities with local content and local broadcasters is really an important part of the company. So in Philadelphia, we're KYW News Radio, we're Sports Radio WIP, we're Talk Radio 1210 WPHT, we're 92.5 Country, we are WTDY 96.5 and 98.1 WOGL. So we have 6 radio stations. We produce over 1,000 events every year, so we're very much in the event business, as Amy had spoken about with Philadelphia Media Networks. And events can be as simple as an appearance at a bar or a nightclub promoting Miller Lite, to something as dynamic as the KYW News Radio Women's Achievement Awards, or the WXTU Anniversary Concert, which is this Sunday at the BB&T Pavilion, where we'll have 20,000 country fans for an all-day festival, to something as unique as WIP's Wing Bowl. So we're in the event business. We are also, in addition to the radio stations, the event business, we have a very dynamic digital business. So we have our owned and operated assets, which you may be familiar with, the websites, and our social media, appropriate social media properties for each radio station. But we also have about 24 other digital assets that we would sell. So we can sell Facebook targeted to engage our advertisers with our listeners that way. We could sell targeted email. We could sell search engine optimization, search engine marketing. So in an ideal world, any way that an advertiser wants to connect with somebody, we want to be able to provide that service. So from a content standpoint, look, we're all in the same multi-platform content development business. So we're all out there trying to make sure that the right people are engaging with our assets, whether it's on air or online or on site or on device. And from an advertising standpoint, we're looking to make sure that the advertisers, we can be a total custom solution provider for them. And whatever their need is, we want to be able to deliver and solve that problem for them using all these assets that I just spoke about. The company is the #2 producer of podcasts in America, behind the #1, which is NPR. We have over 100 different local sports talk shows, so we are the national leader in sports talk radio. We have 43 professional franchise associations with pro sports teams and numerous college relationships. We are the leader in news with 7 fantastic all-news stations across the country. We are number 1 or 2 in most markets for most of the formats that we're in from a music standpoint. And let's think, what else can I tell you about the company? We also are, we have a division called Smart Reach Digital, which is an in-house ad agency which provides digital resources and digital solutions to our advertisers in any way possible. So when one of our salespeople is out talking to somebody, they can provide all kinds of digital assets and resources without having to go outside. And then we also have an in-house ad agency called Altitude Group, which is very much into social influencers, content integration, events, and we produce events on a national scale, like we do a concert the night before the Super Bowl every year called The Night Before in each city. And that's produced by, sorry about that. That's produced by our Altitude Group, or we produce a cancer benefit and a variety of national events there. So that's kind of the landscape of the company, based here in Bala Cynwyd, 250 radio stations about in top 50 markets, heavily focused on our local communities, local engagement, and delivering that to national advertisers on a national scale as well as local advertisers. I'm happy to take any questions, if anybody has, about our company. Yes, in the back. So the folks from Remember When have reached out to us and have talked to us about potential business partnerships over the years, but nothing at the moment. But yes, we did have that show on the air, 1210. Yep, it's fair. Anything else? No? Let me rattle through my notes, make sure I didn't miss anything for you guys. No, I think we're good. Well, I really appreciate this. I haven't been here since KOW celebrated its 50th anniversary. That was 2.5 years ago, so that was fantastic. And I've been to many of the Hall of Fame dinners. So I look forward to seeing you guys again in November, if not sooner. Thanks.
I was planning to say this at the end because David was going to be last. And I was going to remind you about our lunch, and I was going to give you another piece of useless information. In our archive, we have a disc jockey, 1971 on KQV in Pittsburgh, and name is Jeff Christie. And you could tell where he was going at the time because he read a letter that came from one of the listeners, and the listener's name was Mary Snerdley. We now know him. He's on the air right now on one of your stations, Rush Limbaugh. And we also have David Letterman on a college radio station when he was in college. Somebody just emailed them to us, and we figure it takes up hardly any space, why not save it? But I want to tell you about next month's lunch, which is the power of WIBG. When Bill Wright was doing, what, a 52 share in the morning, and I mean, it was just a powerhouse. And we have Bill Wright, we have Dean Tyler, and coming in from New Orleans at this time, it's tentative, is Don L. Brink. Remember him, the all-night Fink. And to just sort of round it out, we have a couple of musicians that talk about what it was like to get your record played on WIBG. One of them is Chi Divine, who was the lead singer on Memory Lane, which came out 3 different times under the Stereos, the Tams, and the Hippies. It was all the same record. They kept changing the name. And to round it off, we have, for the first time at Broadcast Pioneers, Bobby Rydell. Okay, this is all tentative. We're still confirming all this, but as of now, these people say they're coming. So we want you to come to this luncheon. It is Wednesday, June 20th. and we hope you can make it. I was going to do that at the end, but I figured with the Rush Limbaugh thing to fit in. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay. Our next speaker is a name and a face that I would believe everybody in the room recognizes. That's Scott Palmer. He's out of the broadcast industry, I would say, but he's Director of Public Affairs for the Philadelphia Phillies. He was a former sportscaster and anchor at Channel 6 for 24 years. That's quite a record in broadcasting. Scott was inducted into the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame in 2005. Among his many awards was as Pennsylvania's Special Olympics Sportscaster of the Year. And Scott's has been polishing the Phillies brand for the past 13 years. Scott Palmer.
Good afternoon, everybody. It was very nice to see Amy here and Rick. Some of my old colleagues, and Linda Munich was here as well. Steve Sachs was here. I haven't seen Saxy in a while, so it was great to see so many old friends. I've been lucky enough to have 2 careers, and I'd just like to just mention just something, because I know you want to hear about the Phillies, and we're playing right now, and last I looked, we were losing 1-0, but we are playing, and after the rainouts and the day off, it's good that we're back in action. I think this memory came back to me because this weekend is the royal wedding, and I was reflecting back to the night before my first news anchor appearance on Action News on Sunday morning after I'd been asked to anchor the news. And as most of you know, if you watch the early morning news on the weekends, it's filled with stories that have happened the night before. And I thought just before I went to bed, I hope there's some breaking news and something is important enough to draw viewers, and maybe I'll get lucky and it'll be more than a fire or a crash or something like that. So I went to sleep at about 7:30 because, you know, wake-up call was 2:30. And my son comes in, who was in high school at the time, and wakes me up and says, "Dad, Lady Diana just got killed in a car crash." I said, "Well, there's breaking news I kind of feel responsible for. Rick, you know, I've always thought over the years I probably had a hand in that, but it was not the way you wanted to start a news career. But I really did enjoy it tremendously. I enjoyed mostly the people I work with, and I get a lot of questions in this job. Got a few today, as a matter of fact. Do you miss news? And my answer is always the same. I don't really miss news as much as I miss the people I did the news with. And if you know the people in this room, you can appreciate that, because as a couple of people, I think David mentioned it and Amy mentioned it, the people in Philadelphia broadcasting are first rate. We're very lucky, and you're very lucky to live in a city with such fine broadcasters that have such a high standard. So that I miss. Fortunately, when I did retire, I thought I could retire at an early age and play golf and have fun and sleep in, but I got really bored really fast. And I realized the second time I had power washed my deck in 1 month that I had perhaps been a little premature in my decision to leave the working environment. So I was fortunate that I knew some people over at the Phillies, including a man I have the utmost respect for, and David Montgomery, who said, "Why don't you come on over here and see if you like the baseball business, and if you do, and there's a fit, you know, you can stick around for a while." And I did, and he thought I was okay. I guess enough to that I'm still here 13 years later and having just the best time. I want to talk about the Phillies because that's what you asked me to talk about. It is a time now for the ball club. Most people say it's rebuilding. I like to say it's a time to do some rethinking. We've really changed our approach to how we play baseball games. You've heard a lot about analytics, and I can talk about that. I was kind of a skeptic in the beginning. I'm much more of a believer now than I was then. But the biggest change came when we hired our manager, Gabe Kapler. I'm sure you've seen him. He got off to kind of a rocky start by asking for a pitcher to come into the game after he hadn't warmed up. New manager, new coaching staff, a little unfamiliarity. You're going to make mistakes. He owned up to it. He certainly received a course of booze the opening game, not exactly how he thought it was going to be for his first managing job, but he got through to the other side, and now the ball club's playing very well. I went up to Gabe on the last homestand behind the batting cage during batting practice because I wanted to see if he had any problem with his coaches doing live interviews. I still am connected somewhat to the broadcast community and do a show on Sundays a half hour before the game called Behind the Pinstripes, which we have a lot of fun with. And he said, no, not at all if they want to do it. And I thought, well, I should really kind of carry on the conversation. We've known each other a while. And I said, the club's really playing well. I thought that was easy enough. And he reached over and he shook my hand. He looked me in the eye. He said, congratulations. I said, well, Cap, I haven't thrown a pitch, caught a pitch, or hit a pitch since fantasy camp about 10 years ago. But, thank you. I don't really know why you're congratulating me. And he said, because you're part of this. You're part of our family. And from the very day that he was hired, he made it very clear that the entire organization is pulling on the same end of the rope. He is, he's unreal. And I thought for a while maybe he was a little bit disingenuous because the only person I've met with the same kind of personality in my lifetime is probably Pat Croce. And this guy is, he out Pat Croce's Pat Croce, if that's possible. He is just as genuine a man as you see. And I've always thought if there's people on this end of the spectrum who are negative all the time, we all know who those people are, that there are just as many people probably at the other end of that spectrum, and Gabe Kapler is one of those people. It started with a meeting we had during the off season where he said, I'd like you to be in charge of a talent show we're going to have. I said, we're going to have a talent show in spring training? He said, yeah. I said, okay, well, we probably should do it when you have like the last cut, just before the last cut, so everybody is, the guys that are going to go north and maybe 3 or 4 guys who will come north eventually are involved because you want to build team unity and spirit and everything he was talking about. He said, no, we're going to do it the second week of camp and everybody is going to be involved. All 65 players in the clubhouse and every staff member who's down there, salespeople, marketing people, PR people, they're all going to be invited. They're all going to be a part of it. Again, this whole idea of being inclusive. We're all pulling on the same end of the rope. And we did. We had a heck of a talent show. It was fun. I found out we are much more talented on the field than we are in terms of singing and dancing. And I think my favorite act was a minor league reliever who grew up working for his parents' pizza restaurant. And he actually made a pizza and flew it up in the air. And that was probably the most talented guy we had in the whole show. But we had a heck of a time. And I could tell right then that it was a good, young clubhouse. We've seen most of these guys. We've been doing interviews with them since they were talented minor leaguers, and we knew they were used to winning at the minor league level. And that was a priority, by the way, in our minor league system. Teach them how to win. And now they're here, and if they get behind, hey, we did it in AA, we did it in AAA, we know how to win games. It's a very, very close clubhouse. Scott Kingery got a huge contract. Didn't need to get a huge contract, but they wanted to bring him north. They believed this was a guy for their future, so they signed him to a big contract. His best friend is Reese Hoskins, okay? Reese Hoskins is our future star. Not up to a great start right now, but he's going to be a piece of this puzzle going forward. They're best of friends. In fact, Kingery is still living with Hoskins now while he looks for a place to stay. Well, you'd think Reese Hoskins would be a little upset because Reese Hoskins had an unbelievable rookie year last year, right? And he didn't get paid. But his best friend just got a multi-million-dollar contract to set him up for life. So how did they spend the postgame after that was announced? The same way they did after every postgame, same way they did during every postgame after every game in spring training, by playing ping pong against each other. It's a ping pong table in there. They're best of friends, and they're also great competitors. And Reese lost, I think, by 1 point, and he said, Scott, this is your day. I'm not going to ruin it for you. Go and enjoy your day. Not at all upset that he got paid because he realizes he will at one point too. But these are young players who play not for themselves, but for each other and for the city of Philadelphia. They're Philadelphia kind of athletes. They're really the right kind of people that you're going to be able to get behind the same way you got behind the Chase Utleys and the Ryan Howards and the Cole Hamels. They're good players, and they're good people, and they're very easy to represent. There's a lot about analytics right now, and I'll just talk quickly about analytics, and if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. One of our people who's very involved in analytics told me, if I told you there was a chance to win the lottery, if I gave you a 75% chance, based upon numbers, of hitting the lottery, would you take that, or would you just pick your numbers on your own? I'd take the information as much as I could. Now, they know, they can't tell exactly because human beings are human beings and they might hit the ball a different way. But they know based on information, and believe me, I see another table every day in our lunchroom of people I don't know. They're new analytics people who have just been hired. You know, I think we're probably out Googling Google right now. We have so many analytics people, but they do research with computers that it's hard to imagine. And it's all up on giant screen TVs that they can pull up the information. StatCast, if you don't know what StatCast is, it tells you launch angle, the speed, not just of pitch, the break, everything it tell you. And they know where to put the players based upon where the hitter is most likely to hit the ball. So the other day, we're playing Atlanta. It's a scoreless game in the 4th inning, and Freddie Freeman's up. They don't like the matchup with Freddie Freeman and our starting pitcher that day. So they say, this guy could pop one out. There's a pretty good chance he could. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a shift and bring everybody to the right side of second base. Everybody. Well, Freddie Freeman looks at that. He's an accomplished major league hitter. He looks at it, he says, yeah, you know what? I'm going to get a base hit. He hits it through the left side of the infield. Even our broadcasters say, why did they do that? That's an easy hit. Well, they did it because they knew the next guy up they could handle. The next guy up would probably pop out. The next guy popped out. They set up a trap. Now, everybody doesn't have to know that, but that's why they did that. That's why they suckered Freddie Freeman into hitting the ball through the left side so we could get a single and not a home run. It works almost all the time, and most of the time when it works, you don't know it because the outfielder is right there where he's supposed to be, and there's a line drive that if he's playing in a regular position straight away, it's going to go into the gap, and 1 or 2 runs are going to score. When it doesn't work, it sticks out like a sore thumb, like when it goes over Nick Williams' head by 20 feet. Then why is he playing there? Well, that's, you're not going to get every single one. But based upon the players that we have right now, the system that we have, Gabe Kapler's approach, and it's a nurturing approach. By the way, these are young people, and if any of you have worked with young people, you know they're not the same as folks from our generation. Rookie players used to get hazed. Wasn't good, but they had to earn their dollar, right? They had to earn their place. Now, everybody's nice. Everybody can't be more complimentary of our young players. This is what we want. We want them nurtured now. Honestly, this is the way it is with young people. And they recognize this. Gabe Kapler had a meeting, and I'll close with this, on the last homestand. And he said, these players we have are busting their butts. They're spending extra time in the cage hitting. They're working out in the weight room like crazy people. They're paying attention to everything we want them to pay attention with analytics. We need to do our best as a coaching staff to put in the same amount of time. So make sure you never leave the ballpark without taking time to talk to 1 or 2 players, compliment them, and see if there's anything more that you can do for them to make them more comfortable in their role. I'm not saying we're going to get in the playoffs. We're certainly not going to win the World Series this year, but the club is headed in the right direction. And I really do like the athletes that we have right now. And the manager, I'm a believer, and we'll see where we go from there. Any questions, if you have it? Yes, of course.
Is the use of analytics throughout?
Yes, everybody's doing it. It's an arms race now, honestly. The Dodgers hire 2, we hire 3. I mean, it's incredible the amount of people. We don't have enough space anymore at the ballpark. No, it's not a secret. It's just we're doing it as well or better, we think, than anybody else is doing it. Yep.
At what point does the manager's understanding of the situation, and can it differ
Sure.
from your statistics?
Yeah, there's a month.
Say, I get a sense of this, I know my player.
Yep.
And I can see a certain look in his eye.
Sure.
Punch to the shoulder. I'm not going to do what they say. At what point does that happen?
You need to have a feel, and I think it's the manager's ultimate decision how he's going to play things, but he's also armed with all this other information. But if his feelings are strong enough, you go with your gut feelings. I had one of the analytics people say the game is going to change tremendously in the next 5 years. He said that in 5 years from now, many decisions will not be made in the dugout anymore by the manager or the coaching staff. It'll be made by the analytics department. I said, how are they going to get the information down to the players? He said, quarterbacks in the NFL have a helmet with earphone, don't they? I said, yeah. He said, well, what's to keep us from putting earpieces in our batting helmets? And go the other way, an earpiece in the catcher's mask, and call pitches from up on top. Could do it. You know, and they just think that that's the future of the game. I don't know if it's going that far. I'd rather not see it go that far, but who knows? Yes? Yeah, it started there in Oakland, but let's be honest. They still, in Oakland, with Billy Beane, have not won one playoff series. So, I mean, I have to give him credit where credit is due. It's a small market team. They didn't have a lot of money to work with. They got the best players they could to fit into a system. You know, that's kind of what we're trying to do, but with a lot more information. One of the people we hired last year, we got from Google, believe it or not. He had YouTube, that was his account, YouTube for Google. His name is Andy Galdi. I mean, we start hiring those kind of people from Google, you're hiring some smart people. I mean, I think the advantage that baseball has is a lot of people just want to work in baseball. It's pretty cool to work for Google, but believe it or not, we have an office space now that's set up like Google. They put brick walls in it so it looks like an upstairs loft. There's no desks. There's long tables. Everybody has their laptops. There's about 3 sofas in there where guys sit and with their laptops and work. I mean, we've really become much more advanced in preparing for a game than we ever were before. Yes?
The thing that you did with Santana was great because he's starting to come around now.
Well, yeah.
But I'm
Yes.
watching the games all the time. I'm pulling for Reese.
Yeah, I know. He's such a good guy.
I know it. He did such an incredible thing last year.
Right.
What about this year?
Well, you know what? Baseball's a game of adjustments, and Scott Kingery's finding that out now. I have a chance in my job to talk to all these guys and just go down to the clubhouse and just talk and not do an interview, but just talk because I want to learn more about baseball. It's my favorite sport. It always has been. That's why I'm there. But the game is a series of adjustments. Reese Hoskins came up. Pitchers didn't know about Reese Hoskins. He was very patient. He wasn't afraid to hit an 0-2 count, which he still isn't. He's very relaxed, and he got an incredible hot streak. Baseball's also a series of streaks. Now, this year, they've done a lot more homework on him. They know where the weak spots are. He has to now adjust to what they adjusted to. Same way with Scott Kingery. And the great ones do that. And these two guys, Kingery and Hoskins, are really bright people. The best thing I can say about Hoskins is not just that he's a quality guy, he's wise beyond his years, but Gabe Kapler said the other day, he walked up to him in the outfield during batting practice and started talking about the team, and Hoskins gave him a scouting report on every one of his teammates, what they needed, what buttons they needed to push to get to those guys. So he's the ultimate teammate. He's a little bit like Chase Utley, or as Charlie Manuel said about Scott Kingery, because Kingery's natural position is second base. Charlie Manuel said, this guy is Chase Utley with a smile. So that's it. That's probably a good place to end. Thank you very much for your kind. Oh, go ahead. I can't not let Bozo ask a question, for crying out loud.
Is there anything the fans can do to help the team play better or to?
Show up and spend money would be good. We're not drawing too well right now. I looked at the advance for this next homestand. It's not real great. Get behind him. I'm not saying don't boo. I mean, we're Philadelphia. We're gonna boo, but boo for lack of effort. When you see lack of effort. Nick Williams is a guy who didn't show a lot of effort. Got benched twice in AAA. He runs out balls harder than anybody right now. So he got the message. But if you want to boo, boo. That's fine. It's all right. You know, we pay good money to go see these guys. But don't boo if they're trying. That's when the player gets upset. But I'll tell you what, they really enjoy playing in Philadelphia. This is their home, and they love the fans here. And there's not one guy that wants to be traded. That's the way our clubhouse is right now. They all enjoy being around each other. So I know it's getting late, but thank you very much for inviting me. It was my pleasure to be here. Thank you, everybody.
So, ladies and gentlemen, up to now, believe it or not, the speakers you've heard, the 3 speakers you've heard, have all been in one field, a field that I spent 32 years in. It's called public relations. And that's what you've been hearing, public relations. Well, right now, we have a speaker who is uniquely different. And I think you'll really enjoy her. Her name is Cindy Kiter, and she is the daughter of the late and great Channel 6 sportscaster Les Kiter. Les was inducted into the Broadcast Pioneers Hall of Fame in 2013. So Cindy is an actress, playwright, and comedian. Her solo show is a play about her dad's life, recreating Kiter. It debuts at the Lion Theater on West 42nd Street in Manhattan on June the 14th. And the play is about how life can knock you down and how baseball can resuscitate. So here's Cindy Kiter. Welcome.
Pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
I could be your panel. I'll answer anything you want.
Oh, but speaking of that, when we're all done, don't go away,
Great.
because I'm sure you'll have questions for all four of our speakers, and perhaps even me. So don't go away.
Do you want your bomb?
By the way, he said, nice to meet you. It shows you where his memory is.
We
because
met.
in our April newsletter, there's a picture of you and
me.
Cindy together in, what, 2013?
2013 when I came up for
When
Dad's
her
Award.
dad was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So you met her before.
And actually, before you leave, I'm going to do what I was going to say at the end, at the beginning. This man, Jerry, is the reason I am here. In 2013, I happened to live in New York City. I came up here today with my wife, Lori, who's directing my show. And I also am sitting at a table with my first boyfriend at 12 years old at Ithan Elementary School, who gave me a kiss, Dave Harrington, 48 years ago, and John Pravetti, who I happened to meet unexpectedly while I was doing a small walking tour in Greenwich Village a couple of years ago. And he said, oh, and when anybody tells me they're from Philly, I go, oh, like, we're in Philly. Like, okay, well, the main line, okay. And Amy, no offense, but we all went to Radnor. Where are you? Is she gone? Oh, okay. Well, I cleared the room. Anyway, so to have me go full circle here with my life and my father, but Jerry calls me and says that the Broadcast Pioneers Association of Philadelphia is going to be honoring my father posthumously, and he would love if I would come up on behalf of the family and accept the award. And it was a marriage made in heaven. I was so honored, and the night I actually was standing, I was having microphone problems, and I was standing between Jerry and Larry Kane, and they both rescued me in the microphone, and I just wish my dad could have been there for that, and I think he's somewhere around, and I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual, and to come back and talk about my father a bit and segue into my show, how this all came about, is because of this man. I am now a proud member of the Broadcast Pioneers Association, and if anybody forgets anything I have said or that Ed kindly mentioned, I have cards with all the information about the show, and they're free. So,
By the way, in case you missed it, in our April and our May newsletter, we have excerpts from her website, leskiter.com. There's a little plug for you.
There you go. Take 'em all.
But, you know, there's a lot more than what we've been running. Just like when people write books, T. Morgan over there, I was lucky enough to write the foreword for the book. You know, we run excerpts from different things like that, and there's a lot more on leskiter.com. There you go.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and everybody for hanging. The three previous speakers, I recognize faces on TV and growing up. I'm going to do this all out of order. I actually knew I was coming up, and I was driving from New York City up here this morning. Actually, Lori was driving so I could keep putting my speech together. So it's in two different ways. But now that it's all out of order, I'm going to speak out of order, but I won't go longer than my allotted time and hopefully cover everything. On the way up here, my first cognitive memory of Dad and us being in Philly, we were born, my twin sister and I were born in New York City when Dad was on Wins Radio doing the Giants baseball and football and the Knicks, et cetera. We moved to Philadelphia when Jody and I were 4 3/4 years old. And because of my dad, who knew I was going to be an actor, I made my TV debut on Happy the Clown, Sally Star, and The World Around Us. In fact, I won $5 of nickels answering the question I don't remember on The World Around Us. And I remember I had a bag of nickels and my twin sister didn't, but I shared them. And that was all here. And my father's career here, which is why I'm actually here today, and then moving into how I got the idea for this crazy show I'm doing, are all 5 of my brothers and sisters and myself. There's 5 of us together. There's 2 sets of twins. I have a twin sister, Jody, and 5 years older are Barbara and Marty, who all got to live out going to Radnor Junior High and Radnor Senior High, and my brother Ricky, who came by himself. So it's 5 kids, 3 pregnancies, 2 surprises, and I'm one of the surprises. But we, with my dad being on WFIL, and I knew when he went out the door every morning with his briefcase that he wasn't going to an office, because that's all I know of my father, going out the door he had a briefcase, but it was to go and do these weird things on TV and on fields, et cetera, and radio stations and in booths. And I got very lucky to be able to go to a lot of these things. And because of that, watching my father both do a live broadcast or recreate, which I'll mention in a moment, and interviewing, meeting Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier and Billie Jean King. And because of Dad, when we moved to Hawaii, I played volleyball with Wilt Chamberlain. It was the 76ers, and my dad had done some announcing of the 76ers. By the way, I came up to his hip. And one of my favorite conversations I ever had with another human being was with Wilt Chamberlain. I was playing beach volleyball, and I got brought in with a couple other women to warm up his team, the Big Dippers, setting him. And as the etiquette as a volleyball player, when you're setting, you ask the hitter where they want the ball to be. And I just said, so, excuse me, Mr. Chamberlain? He said, call me Wilt. I said, excuse me, Mr. Chamberlain? Call me Wilt. Yeah, Wilt, where would you like the ball? Cindy, just put it up as high as you can. Which was because I was short, and I will never say that again. Okay, now getting back to my dad, up until his last moments, he died in 2009, 2 weeks away from his 90th birthday. And, but he will tell you, even now, his favorite arena ever to broadcast from was the Palestra, doing the Big 5. By the way, Eagles, Villanova in 1 year, Phillies come in, 76ers. I want everybody to beat the Patriots. I'm also a Jets fan, but that was just exquisite. Just wanted to put that in there. And Dad today would be so happy about Villanova this year again. Anyway, watching my father talk about, I've read it in his book and heard him have to say this speech numerous times about his infamous night in the Palestra with his engineer, Toby Deluca, up in the rafters of the top, St. Joe against Villanova, and the bomb scare evening. And I don't know, a lot of you, I'm old enough to be a lot of people's grandparents in here, but my dad had to, because of a phone call from the station, because all of Philadelphia, you have, as he would describe it, over 10,000 fans just busting at the seams. You have Villanova against St. Joe. You can't get a bigger rivalry than that. And to get the phone call, everybody, the PA announcer, he always gives credit to how smooth he was, asking everyone to quietly leave the room. meaning the whole palestra, and they got everybody out. Both sides of the teams went out. And now Dad is up in the booth and gets the call. Les, you stay up there because all of Philadelphia is listening and you have to announce this. And meanwhile, police officers are coming up the stadium steps looking at my dad and Toby going, get out. And my dad has his earphones on and he's like, I'm on. And he's watching and Dad would say, as an announcer, it's my job and it's been my career to announce what I'm observing. All of a sudden, to have him become the story, because he said he looked at Toby, and Toby, as the loyal lieutenant, I'm not leaving you here, we're here, and Toby's seeing the police, and they're getting closer and closer, and it's really up in the little, the rafters. Toby didn't know what else to do except take furniture and chairs and barricade Dad and himself in, so the police couldn't get in the door, but they also couldn't get out. And as Dad said, well, we're either gonna get arrested or we're gonna blow up or both. But I'm gonna stay on the air and keep this going. And to this 90 years old, just before 90 years old, he remembered that, and it's one of his most exquisite moments as a broadcaster. And excuse me, I've got a little cough here. Talking about Toby Deluca, I actually have chosen to have him as my name of my imaginary producer in my show. My dad did a lot of sports, and one that he is very well known for and put him on the map in certain people's eyes, speaking of the Phillies, was doing his baseball recreates. And I got to see my dad announce games live in Hawaii with the Hawaii Islanders, announcing in the stadium, and going to Connie Mack Stadium when I was a little girl with the Phillies, doing some pre-broadcast of the games, and then going into the booth with my father when he did these baseball recreates, which, if anybody is not aware, it's become a lost art because at the time they didn't have the technology to transmit a game across the country, and it was cheaper to keep the announcer in the hometown. The team is, so when, specifically, my father did several teams, but his notoriety was with the New York Giants becoming the San Francisco Giants. So he was on Wins Radio at the time, and the Giants are now in San Francisco, and my dad's in the little booth, and he would get the information of the real game off the ticker tape or the AP wire or whatever was transcending it, and then he would take that, and he had a drumstick and a little wooden box that he figured out to be the perfect sound of a ball hitting a bat, and his producer, and a glass window with the producer on the other side with sound effects, boos, cheers, big cheers, all kinds of things, and Dad did his homework with whatever field he was at, knowing how it looked, etc., and he would redo these recreates of the games, and his, I'm very proud to say, for the first 3 years of the Giants in San Francisco, Dad's recreates did better than the live Yankee broadcast. And it's with the technology today, and we were just talking about the technology, I mean, that you have Google deciding what player is going to go out, and this is a lost art. And when I was at my father's funeral, we scattered his ashes in the Pacific Ocean, and it was quite an amazing array of news helicopters and boats and fans, people from all walks of life for my dad. And I was literally pouring my father's ashes into the ocean, standing in the canoe, and I did not want this lost art of this technology to go away. And there was some esoteric thought of that recreate going away with my father. And probably it comes from a spirit of keeping my father alive in my own eyes, but I started mulling and writing, and in the last 7 years, going through now extensive drafts and rewrites and readings, and this woman's amazing director's eye and dramaturge, my wife Lori, who I actually met in 2003, she cast me in a play. So it's not just nepotism. She's a damn good director, and she cast me before she knew me. I could say that. Yeah. And then I followed her, okay. Anyway, I took this Recreate and decided to, while my father was passing in 2009, he was going downhill for a few months, and then it got closer. And at the same time, they were in Hawaii, and I'm in New York now, and I was going through my own turmoil. I was in an abusive, bad marriage that was falling apart, which was good, that it was falling apart so it could go away. At the same time, within a 2-week period, my sister-in-law took her own life, and then a week later, literally with separation a week later, my sister-in-law taking her life, a week later, Dad passing away. So by the time I got to Hawaii for Dad's funeral, I was pretty much a mess, and you just kind of power through. But getting back on my own 2 feet, excuse me, and I decided to take the Recreate, which is all about redoing what has happened, and my life is a redo of what has happened, plugging it into a timeless, excuse me, baseball game that I made up with an all-star roster in a field that doesn't exist anymore, excuse me, called Ebbets, and having the game mirror and use as a parallel to my own life, which is all about all of us dealing with, as human beings, you struggle, you fall down, getting back up. And my father instilled that in me and the rest of my family, not to quit and to always get back up. And I've taken that whole notion and made up this 90-minute play, of which I've had nightmares that the New York Times comes and says, what a great game. What a neat story. What the heck are these two doing on stage together? But you get to where I can't not do this, and it started funneling through me. I've never thought of myself as a writer, although my first solo show, this is going to be my second solo show, was about my dad's career through my eyes. And now here I am. I never thought I could be brave enough to actually step into my father's shoes. I never wanted to. He's so good to actually think I could emulate trying to be a broadcaster and charge people money to come and see me try to do this as a baseball Recreate on stage, where I'm really in an imaginary booth that should be my dad's booth, and I'm making up this game, but here we go. I'm very excited about it. From the game, there's the show itself. I think I'm okay, a couple more minutes. I'm never leaving this stage. I'm just kidding. It's enough. I'm your fourth one. I know everyone needs to go on. The show itself, I want to make sure I hit these points. Taking this imaginary game, and there are 3 things that I wanted to do as a writer and a playwright with this. That, give me 1 second here. Just went out of order. Okay, that's not it. This is, let's see. Oh, here it is. Okay. You write everything down, it's all preparation. Excuse me. The baseball Recreate itself. Oh, thank you so much. I brought water up. God forbid I grabbed it. Thank you very much. The baseball Recreate itself, my life, my own turmoil that I was going through at the time, paralleling that with sports, but specifically the baseball Recreate, because I think anybody who's a baseball fan, I got specifically with baseball as opposed to any other sport in terms of it paralleling life, that one pitch can change everything, as everyone knows. You get bases loaded, 2 outs, your worst hitter you think is up, 9th inning, one pitch changes everything. Same thing with a phone call. One phone call changes your life like one pitch changes a game. And that is what my whole show is about. And I was hoping that I could have my show help others that have gone through certain life circumstances we go through that aren't always pleasant, excuse me, that this could heal myself and them all at the same time. Because the truth is, there's 27 plots, we just keep repeating them, and it's just different circumstances. But I don't think I have to be a major league player or a damn good announcer to have someone relate to whatever is going on in our humanity. And my show, I'm using that, the baseball recreate as that parallel, and hoping I can bring that all together. And I didn't know that I was going to be a woman, excuse me, on stage at 60 years old as an actor talking about an abusive relationship or coming through with the love of my father and family and circumstances with what's going on in the world today with the Me Too movement, et cetera. It's been rather, every day there's one more nuance coming in that you don't even know you're writing, and I think it's just because of the human experience. I'm really sorry about my cough. Anyway, that being said, did I get to everything, Lori? Okay, well then in wrapping up, I really, if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. I've had more fun putting these teams together. I have Satchel Paige pitching, Sandy Koufax. Where's Ed? I'm Jewish too. And Hank Greenberg. I have Hank Greenberg and Satchel Paige, Sandy Koufax because of that.
Cindy, don't leave the stage. Don't leave the platform. There's a reason and a surprise for you. Little surprise.
Oh my goodness.
There is a gentleman sitting back here who's going to come up, Mike Nazillo. He is a retired producer-director at WFIL-TV.
Oh my goodness.
And he had an office right next to your dad. And your
I
dad,
remember
and
your
dad
face.
Took him to
You-
interview Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, and he's going to tell you about it.
Oh. Very, very nice. Let me grab my...
I just want to say this is what I'm about to relate is something that really made an impression on me in my career, and having an office right next to Les Kiter. Now, I had been in Milwaukee before I came to Philadelphia.
Bob
as
Uecker's one of my
Scotty.
players.
And I had worked in coordinating games, producing and directing, and also on the Green Bay Packer game. Having said that, I came to Philadelphia. My office was right next to Les. Now, I knew Les from radio, and my uncle loved him because he gave all the best track results.
Oh, can I give you a card?
Yes, please. I have to go. I'm so sorry, but it was a pleasure meeting
Oh
you.
my God.
Thank you. Your remarks, it just brings back, the continuum of Channel 6.
If
It
you
is
get
so
a date,
nice.
I have 16 performances over 4 weeks.
Wow.
9 minutes away.
You know what? I'm going to have to come see you.
I'd love it.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You're more
Honored
than
to hear you.
Nice to see you. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I have to go.
So
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
so sorry I had to interrupt
That's
you.
all right.
Go Phillies!
Go Phils.
Anyway, I was working on the show, on my own show. It was called Target, that I was producing with Connie Rusin was the host. And Les was next to me, and he was always an easy guy to get along with and a wonderful man. And all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door, and he opens the door, and he said, "Mike, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm working on the show." He says, "Come with me." He said, "I need some support." He says, "There's something big going on with Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier." And I said, "What's going on?" He said, "This gal, Dolly, whatever her name was, on a black radio station, had said that Muhammad Ali was in Joe Frazier's gym and he wanted to fight him out on the street." So Les says, "You come with me." I said, "Well, okay." So we go there, and there's hundreds of people there. And it was in the black community, so I opened the door, Les gets out, and one guy says, "Hey, there's Les Kiter." And we started walking towards Joe's gym, which was about a half a block away. And the people parted like the Red Sea. And we went right through, and everybody said, "Hey, Les," and whatnot. I said, "Well, I'm in good form with Les." And we go right in, up to the gym. People were pressed against, I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of people there. And you could hear Ali screaming at Joe. We got into the locker room, and Joe Frazier's backed against the wall, and Ali's screaming at him. And Les walked in, and he said to Joe, he said, take it easy, because we're going to try and get a hold of Yancey Durham, his manager, to get there. Because Frazier, Ali wanted to take Joe out in the street and whip him. So this, I can't tell you how long, 15 minutes of this, Ali screaming, I mean, and every time Les would try to hold him down, he went at Les. It was unbelievable. Les was so calm and whatnot. So finally, Ali says, let's go out in the street. So he takes all of them up and is following him, and there's hundreds and hundreds. Les grabbed Joe, and he said, stay here. Yancey Durham, his manager, is coming here. So finally, Yancey made it there, calmed him down. He says, you're not go out in no street fight. He says, you only get paid when you're in the, in the ring. And so we go out, and all the people had gone away, and Yancey Durham went to Les, and he couldn't thank Les enough for calming that situation down for Frazier. So your dad was, to me, one of the great guys in sports. He was terrific.
Wait, I have an addendum to that. 90 seconds, I have an addendum at that same time, because I was 5 and a half, did not know. But my parents were going through, I've told this story, it's incredible. My dad and mom were going through, Dad's doing the 6 and 11 o'clock news at WFIL, but we didn't understand that Dad, when he's on TV, I just knew that when he was done, 15 minutes later, if he wasn't gonna go do a 76ers game, he was gonna come home and we were having dinner. But what I couldn't understand, or Jody, is that Dad couldn't see us when he was on TV. So he'd go, hi there again, sports fans, Les Kiter here, and Jody and I are going, hi, Daddy, and he just keeps going with the scores and everything. He'd come home, we wouldn't talk to him. I was so pissed off, we would not talk to him. My mom and Dad had to, what can we do to get Cindy and Jody? I know, we'll take him to the station, to WFIL, and we'll show him in the studio, and they'll see how Dad does this and break the magic and understand why we can't. Well, the night they happen to take us happens to be the night Joe Frazier has a big fight that week, and there's a boxer in town, and Dad has a guest. He'd have guests all the time, and Jody and I are now outside, and they're so we could really understand this. We promised Dad we'd be very quiet. So they, when you're in the room where they're shooting, there's big tall ceilings with the lights, cameras, and Dad's sitting at the desk with Gunner back, doing the weather, with Gunner back, and I'm very old, with Gunner back, and Jody and I are in the way off, like 100 feet back, way behind the cameraman. We're just like watching, and Dad's interviewing this guest, and this gorgeous man, and they're having this conversation, and Daddy, when they go off the air, he wants us to actually see the table where he's sitting, and the guest is kindly staying there with him, and they're chatting, and Dad introduced us to this man who couldn't have been warmer, and an absolute Adonis. He's tall. He looked like he just flew in out of the sky, and he leans down into Jody and I are like 2.5 feet tall, and he takes both our hands. And he leans down into our faces and said, how 2 cute little things like you come out of such an ugly man? Muhammad Ali. It was right there. I love to tell that story.
And what was his favorite expression on basketball games? A bombastic shot or something?
It's a ringtail howitzer.
howitzer.
In again, out again, Finnegan.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm doing baseball.
Yeah.
Up the elevator shaft. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Oh, no. Thank you for
Jerry, thank you for everything. Anybody that wants to ask me a question about anything with the show, and again, I have cards. New York City is only 95 minutes away, and I have a 4-week run. The first week press will come, so don't look at that, and we'll see what happens, and hopefully, my goal, if anything nice comes from this, and I get the chance to actually bring this to the theaters in Philly, it would be a dream. Thank you all very, very much. Oh, thank you, Cherry.
Thank you all for coming. I do want to say that you're getting a piece of mail in the mail today, tomorrow. It's your membership renewal, okay? So please renew your membership. We'd love to keep you in membership. One little thing is, on the membership form, there's a little box saying, I'd like to make an extra contribution. That really helps. Last year, 200 of our members checked off that box, and they ranged anywhere from $2 into the thousands, okay? But we take our work very serious. We mentor college students. Our archive facility right now in the other room, our president, Bill Galhouse, is taking a webinar about archiving procedures at the Library of Congress to help us out in this. So, you know, that is in the mail. That's about it. Ed, say goodnight, Ed.
Good night, Ed. If
Everybody's a comedian.
thanks for coming. See you next month.